We will start with our consent agenda. And the only thing on our consent agenda was the minutes of last time's meeting, January. Any comments or corrections to the minutes? If not, can we have a motion for their approval?
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes. With that, we'll move out of the consent agenda and we will get into regular reports. We have two regular.
We actually have one other item that was added late.
Oh,
It was
okay,
added
excuse me.
On the reposting that Stacy has.
Okay, so Stacy, do you need to speak about the bank resolutions?
Yes, we had two resolutions that I sent out with the pre-read on Friday.
Okay.
And these are just adapting to our current senior leadership team, who are the authorized signatories on our bank accounts.
Okay. Any questions or comments for Stacy? If not, can I have a motion for the approval?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you very much. So now we'll move on to the regular reports. And Stacy, do you want to start with the finance update?
Do that.
You saw our normal pre-read in the update that went out on Friday, and see if we will get these on the board for you. While hopefully this is coming up, this is still a case of kind of looking like we looked last time. Still favorable on kind of all of our key dashboard metrics. Enrollment and attendance above budget so far. Our liquidity position remaining strong. And an update, kind of one new thing from the last time is we refined our expense forecast for the year, and we're looking favorable from a payroll standpoint. That's driving some upside in our expense forecast for the rest of the year. So that's kind of the big change. As we talked about at the last meeting, we have from a vacancy rate in our sort of total budgeted positions. Vacancy rate in those positions year to date are creating some upside in salaries and benefits compared to our budget. That's kind of the main thing I'd like to call out. If you want to take any questions.
The dashboard is green.
Dashboard green in all four quadrants.
I had a question, if you don't mind, Stacy, on page 6, and we touched on this in the past, but the only area that we're a little behind is the pre-K enrollment by campus. It's not material to our financial picture, but if pre-K expands over time, if this was systemic, it could be in the future. Any thoughts? Do you think it's just because it's
It's definitely the challenge of half day is what we're seeing. It's harder to recruit for when districts are subsidizing full day pre-K. And Anne has been working very closely with a new potential pre-K partner in Fort Worth, where there are some really creative models that are coming out about blending Head Start funding and state funding in order to provide full day pre-K. And of course, it's only for students who qualify for the Head Start piece of it, but definitely this organization in Fort Worth is more on the cutting edge of those creative models. And so we're excited to have that be an opportunity in Fort Worth that then we can help introduce to our Dallas-based pre-K operators.
Thank you, Yasmin.
Yasmin, do we offer 2 half days or just
A
a
morning
single
and an
half day?
afternoon, yes. And oftentimes you see it's the afternoon where we have the limited enrollment.
Yeah, I don't have the breakdown, Kevin, of that gap, like at a peak pre-K or gratis pre-K, which like, what is the morning session full and it's all in the afternoon, or is there some missing in both? But I know that the majority of it is in the afternoon session.
Any other questions for Stacy on the finance update?
There's still no operational issues with student-to-teacher ratios because obviously the attendance that we're trending at and the over budget overall in revenues is flowing to the bottom line because of that a little bit, right?
Yeah, so there, of the vacant positions, most of them are not teaching roles. So the student-teacher ratios should be about what we had budgeted for the year, except for where we're over-enrolled. We are above budget, so there are going to be pockets where some are higher and some are lower. Is that what
Right. Well, the places where we're over-enrolled, which is leading to our attendance being higher, or not attendance, but our enrollment being higher than average in aggregate. We're not seeing any issues with over-enrollment that impacts the quality of the education.
No, I haven't heard.
Anything similar to that.
I mean, we haven't looked at data specifically to say our kind of section by section of these sections performing any lower, and I haven't heard direct feedback on it.
No,
Okay.
no, it's not like all of a sudden you have in one classroom 5 more children. It's, where you'll see this kind of onesie, twosie across classrooms, and that's
So
why it's
very
not.
much more easily absorbed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And again, we've not taken in any new children this school year, which is the first time in years that we haven't taken in children during the school year.
Any other questions?
I was just curious about the next slide on there, and then you have circled a couple of the campuses that look like they have a higher percentage of lower than budgeted enrollment. I'm just curious how you think about that.
I mean, every year we kind of end up with some campuses who overperform from an enrollment perspective and some underperform. So it's not unusual to see not everybody ahead and to have a few that are challenged. There is sort of a common theme here, though. In Fort Worth, as we're continuing to build out the primary schools, we've been behind in Fort Worth probably most years, and this is if we dug into grade level. I don't know right offhand what are the grade levels that would be causing the gaps. Likely kindergarten, where we're trying to take approximately 180 new kindergartners across both schools, that we're just not filling kindergarten now. We can come back with grade level information if that would be helpful. And then Hampton being behind as well is kind of typically a school where we're challenged, very competitive area down there, challenged to get all the way up to the budget.
And what about page 8, the cash equipment metrics?
Could you be more specific?
Yeah, the June 2016 projected looks like it could be approaching a concerned area with covenants.
It being 7 days ahead, actually, I'm feeling pretty good. Feeling very solid about the cash projection number. This does, we've even set aside from this number a reserve to help cover our compensation adjustments that we're planning for next school year. And being at 67, we are, earlier in the year, we were forecasting 62, so we're continuing to creep up for June, where we're projecting June to be. It's only getting better. And the longer that we are sort of over-enrolled through the year, the attendance rate is at or above budget, the more dollars we're actually monetizing. The state, we're thinking we're going to be in $117 million state revenue range. The state right now is thinking, based on current figures, that we would be at 118.5. There's about $1.5 million to $1.8 million more that the state thinks we would get. We're being conservative right now and assuming that we continue to have attrition, that our attendance rate dips a little bit. But the longer that doesn't happen, the more that we kind of monetize more of what that state thinks we're going to get. So that has continued to trend up with this 4 year state number.
Anything else for Stacy? If not, I guess we'll transition into the academic update. Thank you very much. Rich?
Awesome. So, a lot to share with you, but I know that we want to leave time for that discussion Tony talked about. So I'll try to high-level summarize it and open up the floor for some questions. But we had a strong month and a half since coming back from the semester. We had our interim map, mid-year map testing, our winter map testing given to all students K through 8. Our high schools, select high schools, all excluding the North Hills Prep, had their ACT lineup tests for our 9th, 10th, and 11th graders. We also updated our predictions on how our students would do on the March and April STAR assessments. We have we have 3 now out of our 7 schools that are in IB authorization. Whitney from Peak Primary just wrapped up hers today, and that was the 3rd of our schools going through IB authorization. Really exciting. We piloted this new thing. I know that we had talked about this in some high-level conversations earlier, but we wanted to definitely begin taking the social-emotional learning of our students much more seriously and really being thoughtful about how students are developing and really their non-cognitive skills, their social-emotional learning skills. So we just got back our data on student perception surveys, how they think about their school environments, their relationship with teachers, how they feel about their ownership of learning, and gave this to over 8,000 students, 3rd through 12th grade, and it's going to be very exciting to dig deep into the research and analysis, because we're going to analyze this data versus the academic performance and growth data, and I think we're going to learn a lot from this research. So that's what we've done over the last 2 months. And then upcoming, we have our Common Assessment Window number 3 coming up. This is this week and next week. And then in March, we do have state testing for select grade levels. So I know the font is kind of small up there, but I wanted to present to you a high-level academic summary at halftime right now, and this was part of your pre-read. Essentially, there are a couple of key points that I want to make. First, in K through 8, when we gave our mid-year map assessment, in terms of the percentage of students that are on track to hit their goals, we're short about 4 to 5% than where we were this time last year. And so this was definitely a wake-up call for us. We've taken in a lot of teachers, a lot of students, and we want to make sure that we are at or above in terms of students meeting their growth targets as it relates to reading and math. There are a couple of what I would consider root causes for this that we've talked a lot about. First is that the new norms for MAP, which is our normed assessment, came out this summer. We were working off of norms from 3 to 4 years ago, and with MAP, a few years ago, there were maybe a couple of million students taking this test. Now we're looking at close to 10 million students taking the test, hence the norms have changed, and the goal targets appear to be a little bit more ambitious as more students are taking this test. Talking to my charter peers, they called me, are your growth rates looking a little lower or flatter than usual? And that is the conversation with our peers, which is a good thing. And I have a hypothesis. One is that there's been such focus outside of Texas, but in other parts of the country, on Common Core, more rigorous assessments. And at that scale, that's going to bump up, if you will, trends from different bands of performance. So that, I think, is kind of a factor potentially to being off by the 4 or 5 percentage points than we were this time last year. Second is just the volume of students and the volume of teachers that we're just having to train up and take in. And I think we're at the point where we just need to reassess how well we're training our teachers on how to use data and assessments, just as we're moving to a more meaningful scale than we were in previous years. And then the third thing, and this is something that I had a long conversation with two of our directors in the room, Whitney and Amanda. You guys don't mind raising your hand and letting them know who you are. They have almost the classic case example of this issue in terms of our trends. We are meaningfully increasing the number of students who are in the 60th percentile or higher. At the end of last school year, based on the students that we had, half of our students were at that point, 60th percentile or higher. And when you think about the kind of the instruction that we give, we've done, I think, two things really well. We've worked on moving low kids to the middle of the pack, and the middle of the pack kids to this upper band. But now the work is moving this upper band, let's say the students who are in the 60th some percentile, to the 80th percentile. And that's a different scope of work and more training around differentiating for the needs of our top students. We need to flesh that out a little bit more. So, as we're moving students into more competitive ranges, their peer comparison group nationally gets tougher. So that's kind of the story of K through 8. Definitely a number of bright spots, particularly in math. We're making a lot of progress. I know that first and second grade in previous board meetings I shared were areas for improvement. And while we're making trends, positive trends in first grade, we're not seeing the traction in second grade. So we need to unpack that a little bit more. But that's K through 8 in a nutshell. Moving to high school was a pretty interesting tale of two cities. Remember, over the last few years, our scores from our juniors and seniors on ACT were incredibly positive. Last year's senior class graduated with a 21.7 ACT composite, 0.7 points above the national norm. Incredibly proud of that cohort. We needed to push our 9th and 10th graders. During that push, what did we see? We saw rates of their growth, 9th and 10th graders, move up, but it doesn't appear right now at this point that our juniors right now, who are a year and a half away from entering college, are hitting the same metrics than their previous two cohorts. So Remy and Karen, we just actually finished a meeting in Fort Worth at our high school there, really digging deep into this ACT data with our high school there. And a couple of our high schools have what we call very focused special meetings to ensure that there is equitable push for 9th through 12th grade, because what we're seeing is what was traditionally strong, 11th and 12th, 9th and 10th, we're seeing the tables turn a little bit, and we need to make sure performance is equitable across the board. The other highlight from high school is that our math and science scores on our ACT have traditionally been lower. We're looking at the percentage of students hitting a 1 or a 2-point gain being increased by 15-20% in math and science. And we're very happy for that growth, and that's growth from 9th through 11th grade. So incredibly pleased about our high schools.
Rich, I have one question in this area, because when I read your materials, it says relative to last year, we're slightly better on the ACT line of tests, but then it says we're not on track to meet last year's ACT score. So I have a hard time reconciling those two statements.
So it's 9th and 10th look very strong, stronger than last year.
But the juniors.
But their juniors have dipped.
Okay.
And the juniors are not on track right now to hit the 21 benchmark that we've hit with our previous cohorts. But our 10th grade, for example, at our lowest performing 10th grade school, they're only a 1.5 away from being in the college readiness, hitting college readiness benchmark. We could be at a place where almost all of our high school, all of our 10th grade cohorts meet or exceed that college readiness benchmark. So I think overall, looking at it kind of head to toe in high school, it's looking pretty positive, but we are seeing a little bit of a comparative decline from our junior class, from previous junior classes. And then we have our updated STAR predictions. I think our directors really enjoy those dashboards that are very new, and essentially what we're doing is taking in our data from our our common assessments, our MAP benchmarks, looking at historical data to and build a predictive model so we can let every teacher now know who on their roster is in the place to score advanced or recommended or is not at a place to pass, so they can structure their interventions accordingly. And that's a relatively new push over the last couple of weeks, and really excited to see those tools play out. I'll jump to a couple of slides and then take some questions for the sake of time. But K through 2, really one of the things that we need to be concerned about in K through 2 is second grade. Just really proud of the work that Uplift Lee is doing. I know that we shouted them out last time when we shared our common assessment data from December, but it's really great to see just very high rates of growth at our first in-district partnership school.
And I might interject for just a minute. Dr. Hall was so impressed by the rapid rate of growth that she is actually going to personally share her thanks and appreciation to our Uplift lead teachers, which I just think is really wonderful, and I know that they'll appreciate so much.
How is the district side of Lee doing? Are they doing,
Unfortunately, not as well.
Okay.
Are they seeing improvement since the co-locator?
They would like to see more,
Okay.
but it's not on our part that is being driven. So Dr. Hull is on it.
So just moving down a couple of slides. This is new reporting that I wanted to share with the board, really to give you context as to where our schools start in the fall, how much have they grown, and also share with you kind of the lines that demarcate where the previous, where the kindergartners should be at this time of year, as well as where our, where the cohort of the next grade up, where their kind of winter average should be in terms of national norm. So this gives you an idea as to whether they're on national norm as a network, as a school, and then we over time want to see that data move so that our students are getting to be almost a full year ahead of their peers. So I wanted to kind of share with you kind of those lines and share with you some of the schools that are, for example, in first grade math, both Grand and North Hills. You're also looking at Summit, pretty close to being where their first grade national norm is. So we wanted to just kind of show you kind of this just looking at it more broadly, but being able to pinpoint which schools are behind and which schools are getting to the point where a majority of those students are ahead.
Rich, is
Yes.
the first up where they started,
Where they started in the fall.
and the second is the growth, where they are now?
Yes. The blue line is the Uplift average. The black line, very close to it by the cluster, is where the national norm is for the country. And then the green line to the very right is where, in this case, the next grade up is where their national norm is at this time this year. So relatively, you can see, how far ahead or how far behind some schools are. Moving to third and fifth grade on slide 7. This is where we do have a very real issue on our hands, where reading across the network is below the national norm for these 3 grades, and this is an area of concern that all the primary managing directors and directors know and understand. The positive thing about the third and fifth grade data is that we are making some significant traction in math, and that was an area of that's been an area of focus for us this year. And so, as our primary schools are definitely very focused on monitoring this growth at the individual student level, as well as looking at their STAR data, because there are some grade levels and some content areas that we need to be really mindful about that I shared earlier in the executive summary. Fourth grade math is a network-wide concern. And then some of our IR schools, Pinnacle, Meridian, Mighty, and Hampton, they have pockets of grade level content areas that we need to manage to much more carefully. Just one thing that I wanted to point out, if you look at fifth grade reading and math on the bar graphs on page 10, this is where I think it's very helpful to see the lines from the grade level ahead as well as the grade level below. If you look at fifth grade reading, we do have a few of our schools, Hampton Heights, Mighty, and Pinnacle, who are, those fifth grade cohorts, on average, are a grade level behind. And so over the course of the next couple of years, we do need to monitor their reading interventions so that we're seeing that cohort move closer to the national norm. On page 11, we have our updated predictions, and again, the hot spots are fourth grade math and our IR schools. I do feel that there's just a sense of urgency around this on an instructional and data support front, and so I do feel that going into our third assessment window, CA3, over the next couple of weeks, we'll be updating this, and my hope is that we're able to shave the percentage of students in red by a third, so that we're getting to a place where all of our schools are above that 60% pass rate at a minimum.
Rich, how much do you think at the primary school levels, English learners at Uplift versus English learners in the national averages play a factor in reading scores, if at all?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's something that we'll have to look into a little bit deeply. We haven't disaggregated this by English language learner status. Typically over the last few years, we've had strong growth from them, but I don't know if they're I guess, like, I would want to look into how long it takes for let's say, an English language learner, how many years does it take on average for them to become proficient on a state test and be above national norm? That's something that I'd be more than happy to kind of to do some research on with the team.
When you look at the scores, they're interesting how obviously as the schools, if I look at Summit, the absolute growth is less than maybe at some of the schools where the students started at a lower point. But if I look at like a Summit or a Peak, and I look at fourth and fifth where the growth starts compressing, but you have to believe that the students, when they started with us, were probably starting at the same place as some of the others. So I'm trying to figure out what the entire story is, and how that works. Is that, again, it goes back to where are our teachers, where that are more seasoned, where the model has been implemented with more fidelity, or kind of what is behind a little bit of that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And actually, last Friday, Whitney and Amanda and I were talking about this kind of very thing. And please feel free to kind of add your thoughts. But we do feel that there is this critical narrow band of end of first grade, early second grade, where we see a hard shift, or we don't see the hard shift from some of our schools. So, one of the things that we were talking about is just thinking about how we approach reading and literacy instruction in those grades specifically, because that's where we feel that's where we see the kind of fork in the road. When you kind of flip through the pages, you do see especially in reading, K and 1 more bunched together. When they hit second and third grade, you do see some schools advancing at much higher rates than others. But Amanda and Whitney, I don't know if you would like to add any kind of thoughts or reflections from our conversation around first and second grade.
We were talking too about how you start to see in the older grades, in first and second, all of the schools fall much more closely together. And then third, fourth, and fifth, we start to see that really kind of branch out and everybody was all over. And one of the things we were talking about is in first and second, you are teaching kids very discrete things like numbers, letters, how to read basic words. And then in the upper grades, there comes in all of this background knowledge and experience in science and social studies. And so that's where we start to see sometimes some of our scholars' limited experiences. We have to get creative about how we can build that background knowledge so that that's not holding them back.
Do you think that's the summit explanation? Like if I look at the numbers for first grade in summit or even kindergarten in summit, you know, you're right, they're sort of all bunched together. Especially like if I look at the second grade looks like kind of middle of the pack. But if you move to fourth grade and even third grade, your reading scores are so far to the right. And so do you think that's more about the makeup of who the students are at Summit? Or is it more of a teaching success story across the last 3-5 years?
I think it's probably, I'm the director at Summit, so I'm happy to hypothesize, but I think it's probably more about the teaching experience that those kids have, or the instruction that those kids have experienced. I know like a particular example is my current second grade cohort did not do very well last year when they were in first grade, and I think that instructional experience that they had wasn't at the same quality as some of my older cohorts had received when they were in first grade. Does that answer your question? I don't think it's necessarily a makeup of the students. I mean, I see my kindergartners come in at a pretty, say about the same as most of the other kids in Uplift. And then my kids that have been with us for a long time, we see that they're growing much more than kids who are coming in at older grade levels. And then I think that, kind of to Whitney's point, that as our kids are moving through our program, we're doing a good job, like what Rich said, at moving our kids up to these upper levels, and then not doing as well at, like if they don't already know how to read when they get to second grade, those are the kids who are going to continue to struggle. And I don't think that we're intervening for them as well as we need to.
Like if you look at Peak has a very interesting story on their kindergarten numbers are right in line with all of our urban schools, and then you look at first grade and they are on top of North Hills. You think that has to do with, well, it wouldn't have to do with pre-K.
No,
Because that's
first year.
different.
But then you see North Hills starting to differentiate from the pack, and I think
That's the second
yes,
point.
and it's the second point, right? It's the point around background knowledge that they have, and it's the point around North Hills is just used to how do you move the needle on kids who are already super high. And that's why now for schools like Peak and Summit, they need to be spending more time in North Hills primary school classrooms because they have such a large number of children who are looking like North Hills kids to help figure out how do you move and advance them forward.
And that's why it's pretty exciting that
It's a positive thing, but it's a
yeah.
new challenge for us that we're figuring our way through right now.
And that's where the IB authorizations come in,
Yep.
where Whitney over yesterday had her authorization. Amanda has had hers Monday, Tuesday last week. A lot of our schools are ready for this next level of elementary instructional push that we feel will push this middle of the pack and the students who are above national average. But the great thing is that they've had, I think both of your schools have had strong systems to remediate our low kids. And we will always have that at schools at Peak and Summit and others. We're just widening the level of need that our school directors need to manage. And that's a very difficult task to push top kids, half your kids in the very top ranges, a good 10, 15% who need intervention because they are a grade level or two below.
Especially if you think about how early in tenure our teachers are, you're now asking them to meet two very different needs of children in the room. And so we've been pushing ourselves as a teaching and learning team at the central office, how do we adjust our curriculum support and our teacher development so you can help teachers that have less than 3 years of experience meet those differentiated needs.
The other thing that obviously combats that is if our numbers from kindergarten to first grade, while they're so lined up in kindergarten, in first grade if they were as well.
That's right.
That means that everybody would be at the
Yes.
far end of the right scale instead, and
It's a great segue to middle school, because in middle school, 75% of our sixth graders are new to Uplift, and they're going to start usually on the lower half nationally. And so just to kind of cover some highlights from our middle school, students meeting their growth targets is down 3% from the previous year. Sixth grade, we just always have to monitor sixth grade, especially with new kids coming from district schools into our sixth grade program. And we just re-widened the level of need in our sixth grade. What's really promising is that by the time our students hit 7th and 8th grade, and especially 8th grade, this is for those who came new to us 3 years ago as sixth graders. This is their 3rd year at Uplift. We have a number of students who have come up through our elementary schools. If you look at where they sit versus national norm, they are meaningfully, as a cohort, above national norm, and it's just great to see that that's the cohort of students that we're sending into our high schools. So, we do have a couple of schools that are behind, like Heights. But again, when you think about the type of students Heights is getting from the community starting their 6th grade, those students are starting meaningfully 2 to 3, 4 grades below grade level. By the time they get to 8th grade, they are, they're hanging in there with their cohorts. Any questions on middle school before moving to high schools?
Do we track the kids who've been with us for a longer period of time away from the kids who are not?
Yes, we do. We have a dashboard. It's called the 5 Metrics That Matter dashboard. And one of the things that we look at is the level of college readiness of our students who are in their 3rd year or longer at Uplift. And you'll see that meaningfully that difference from the Uplift average is about 10%. So you're probably looking at almost 15-20% difference in levels of college readiness from students who have been with us for 3 or more years. One of the points I do want to make, though, is that you'll find that in, Deborah and I call it the uplift effect when we write grants and things like that. The uplift effect, if you will, is much more pronounced in the 8th grade than in the 5th grade. So one of the things that we do need to shore up is kind of what we were talking about earlier with our literacy instruction in 2nd through 5th grade, so that when a student is with us for longer periods of time, we're seeing higher levels of college readiness. We definitely see that in enrollment in high schools. Moving to our high schools, again, 9th and 10th grade looked incredibly strong. We have some work to do with our juniors. Making some very strong headway in our math and science, and we want to continue pushing that. The reality is that the number of students that are graduating ready for a math and science degree in college, that's not I would say that last year's senior cohort, we're probably looking at 20-25% of our graduates who could access a degree in chemistry or in math or in engineering. And we do need to see this continued push that we're making in our math and science. It's very positive, but we need to get to the point where more students can access STEM fields versus showing up to college and not being able to access those yet and having to remediate in math and science to be at a place where if that's what they wanted to pursue, that they could pursue that.
what does that number look like at a top-performing, suburban, more affluent public school?
I haven't done that analysis, but I would think it would be pretty similar to us. Our average ACT scores for the last few years would probably be right up there with suburban high schools, but in terms of math and science readiness,
right.
Yeah, that's something that I would have to look into and get back to you.
Because I imagine, it's not going to be 75-80%, right? I mean, it's, so it just for context, it would be nice to know.
Yeah. I'll take that as an action item. And then the last slide before I before I close, is just our work around IB. And what's really exciting is that we had some IB officials, one who came from Bethesda, Maryland, where IB central offices are for the IB Americas. We also had someone from The Hague come visit us 2 weeks ago, and it was really interesting to have this conversation. There's been a spike in the number of IB authorizations in the Dallas-Fort Worth region at Uplift, but also outside of Uplift. And it was really interesting to be a part of a regional, national, and international conversation around providing access to IB for low-income students. And again, we're 3 out of 7 complete. We have 4 more authorizations this spring, and just really excited as that becomes a more defining part of our academic program.
Further questions for Rich? Rich, thank you. That's a great report, great update. Thank you very much. I guess we'll move into action items. And the first action item we have is regarding a required approval for our graduation committee policy. And Maria's going to give us an update on that.
Actually, I'm going to stand over here so I can actually see all of you. So one of the things that we are now required to do by state law for our graduating seniors is what's called an individual graduation committee for those seniors who qualify under the new law. And essentially the qualifications, I believe you hopefully have a handout, are the very first things listed. A senior would have to have passed at least 3 out of the 5 EOCs. They should have taken their unpassed EOCs at every opportunity, at least twice, to be considered. And they have to have completed and earned credit for these courses for graduation. So that is a state law that came out last spring. What we've done at Uplift is we've created our individual graduation committee policy, which we expect this year to affect no more than 6 to 8 of our seniors. Pretty much all of our seniors are really on track to actually graduate with the regular EOC requirements. You can see our required committee members, which are the same ones that are required per state law, and we've added a couple more just to round it out nicely. We have a timeline that we've put in. So we are requiring that schools notify the seniors who would be eligible by April so that they have time to kind of plan and get things put together. We are requiring that all of the communication is done in English and Spanish, and that kids are notified of the final graduation decision before their actual graduation occurs so that they can walk and things like that if they're approved. And then at the bottom you'll notice that there are a long list of IGC criteria. These are similar to the same criteria you would see from, say, Garland ISD, Dallas ISD. We looked up local ISD policies to make sure that we were trying to be as fair as possible to all of our kids. They have to meet 10 of those, and then there are some bold things required. So, we are expecting that their senior year especially, they are actually in school. That's really important. And that they are, attending any sort of tutoring or remediation in those courses that they have not passed their EOC, and that they have actually met the other course requirements to graduate other than those EOCs. So it's a pretty simple policy. Any questions about the policy?
Does this require a motion and a vote, Ian?
Yes.
Okay. If there aren't questions, can I ask for a motion to approve the Uplift policies?
So moved.
Second? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Thank you, Maria. Appreciate it very much.
Can I just ask one question?
Yes.
Would these kids not have graduated last year?
Last year, the IGC also was in effect. We didn't have a formal policy, but we also had some of those kids that were actually still tax testers at the time as well.
The only other action item we had on the agenda was governance committee, a vote on Bryce, but we're going to wait and do that in March after there's something in the pre-read for those of you that don't know Bryce.
We usually have a new nominating form that you can complete if you have someone we should consider for the Uplift board, and we will email that out to everyone. So that way you have it. Melissa shared an example from another nonprofit organization, and so just look for that in your email. And some of you may have it in the printed packet if you picked one up. It's towards the back.
With that, we'll move to information items. The only thing in that category today is advocacy update, and I had hoped that we'd have something in the pre-read about establishing an advocacy committee, but there are a lot of things going on in the past month, so I think you'll see that in the pre-read for the March board meeting. But there has been a lot of activity in the last month, so I'll ask Kevin to give a brief update on just what's gone on recently.
Absolutely. I am very excited that we are a board, and not just as individuals, I should say, but who really seems to be engaging and getting community leaders and elected officials into our schools. We've had a lot of contacts really over the last 30 days with particularly some of our state leaders. I know Jack, I don't know, I'm trying to think of people who are here I can call out. Tony and Melissa have been very involved. Ryan is engaged, and I'm trying to think of everybody.
Kathy
Don's been
and
engaged.
Ardo.
Kathy, yeah, I'm trying to make sure I pick everybody. Ardo's has been very helpful. So I think I said Ryan. I'm just calling out all the people that I see here. I know Shree is trying to get some of our legislators into our schools. So that's great for us to just show off our schools, our scholars, our leaders. We've had contact with multiple state representatives, many of whom are very pro-charter advocates. We've had contact with a couple of state senators. I was fortunate to make contact with the Speaker Pro Tem, and although he doesn't necessarily make sure things happen in Austin, he can keep anything from happening that he doesn't want to happen. So we're making good progress, and I would just request that board members keep up the great work. Again, the board duty is to just get community leaders as well as legislators, elected officials, city, state, national, doesn't matter, into our schools, just because we, as you all know, we show very well. So we want to continue that and make sure we put our best foot forward, preparing ourselves for what could be an ugly session in Austin if oil prices don't turn around, trying to avoid budget cuts and things. So.
And please don't be shy about this is something that you want to be more proactively involved in as a board member in some way, shape, or form. Reach out to myself or Kevin, and the more the merrier.
Absolutely. If you've got any questions, I'm happy to try to. I don't know all the answers, but hopefully I can go find the answers for you if I don't know the answers. So if you've got questions about somebody that we'd like to get in our schools, or if you know somebody and you'd like to get them in a school, we can coordinate. Or obviously you can talk to Deborah or Yasmin, or I don't know who. I don't want to put it on you guys. I don't know who you designate as. Trying to. So it's Corey the one who would set up like school visits and things like that.
Yeah,
Okay.
he'll work with the school leaders to find an
Okay.
appropriate time that works.
Kevin, quick question. Is this set up as a committee, or is this just?
Was that? I'll let Tony answer
Yeah,
that.
I think that's the plan, but that's something for the board to consider and vote on. And the plan would be to maybe have something in our reading materials for the March board meeting.
And I'll be reaching out to the governance committee, can figure out what the right way is if they want to handle it, and then you can incorporate it into bylaws and all those kinds of good things.
Any other questions for Kevin or myself? Okay, thank you, Kevin, and thank you, everybody, for all the work that's been done even in the last 30 days. The next item on our agenda is the community open forum. And while I don't think anybody has signed up, we do have some visitors here, and I want to make sure anyone who's a visitor here is welcome to speak now if they have a question or a comment. Yes?
Hello, I visited you guys the last time, And I was just listening. I enjoy coming to know what's going on with Uplift. I enjoy coming to the board meetings. I hope you don't mind me coming. But I was listening, and he spoke about the predictive model that you're developing for the Center Around the Stars. Does that predictive model include the SPED program, the students that are under special education?
Yes.
Okay, because they're in those statistics and that raw data that we're collecting. And it's weird because with the STARS, they went from the modified to the accommodated. And I realized, because my son is part of the special education program, when they went from the modified to the accommodated, with the accommodated, the help was the tools for them to use for their accommodations was built into the software, which meant the teachers had to learn how to maneuver through this software program in order to teach the kids, and the time frame was like this much for them to. So that kind of caught us off guard. So then for the kids who did not pass and had to retake it, they changed it again. They went back to the accommodated, but it was manually as opposed to using the computer system. So there's there's a few hills and bumps with the SPED program as to, getting those kids ready to pass the STARS or take the STARS exam. So I just wanted to make sure there was a lot of focus on the special education program as well, because they're part of these statistics for the college readiness.
Absolutely, absolutely. And to just let you know how this works is that it is roster driven, so that any teacher who pulls up the predictive model dashboard will be able to see how their school is doing, as well as go to a second slide that tells them who their students are on their roster. So our special education teachers do have individual student predictions, and you're absolutely right about some of the changes in terms of the special needs testing. We want to do a better job of that, but some of that is just on the rollout on the state and the framework. But that is definitely on our radar. But our special educators have the same tools, if you will, that our general education teachers would have in terms of student level data.
As do our ESL staff for our LEP students. Our ESL staff has that as well for our ELL scholars as well.
Thank you. Thanks so much for sharing.
Anything else from one of our visitors? Any other thoughts or questions? If not, yes, sir.
Is it open or just?
Yes.
Well, along that line, what I was thinking about when it comes to that, the kids are getting a chance to actually prepare or practice in that format before testing, how much time they get before that, but that's just something we can talk about a little later. I know what you mean. My name is Gerald Barber, and I don't want to take a lot of time, but we'll be approaching to maintain Uplift's excellence. Myself and Leonard Jones in the back there, we'll be speaking with a couple of board members afterwards. We're looking to bring golf as a part and component of all of the kids. I'll be passing out some data about the Texas impact of golf, 6-point-something billion, as we speak of career readiness and guidance, and that's where our kids can be going. There's a reading component that helps third grade through. I'm 15 years middle school classroom, master's degree middle school, so I understand everything that you're saying, and so we'll be looking to actually partner with them and work in all facets, community-minded as well, and to help them really bridge into that. So we look to speak with anyone who wants to get on board with that.
Great, and if you wouldn't mind making sure you connect with Ann Stevenson from our team afterwards.
Great.
The woman who leads all of our community partnerships reports to Ann, and that way we can make sure that she gets time with you to learn more about the program, and then she can also help disseminate it to all of our schools. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anybody else? We appreciate those comments, and we thank our visitors for being here. I think it makes our meetings richer and better, so thank you.